So today we're going to be discussing the Colorado Gold Rush, also known as the Pikes Peak Gold Rush of 1859. Now, mining was by far the most significant industry in the Southwest during the 19th and early 20th centuries, and it's still important to Colorado and the greater Southwest to this day. The result of mining activities in the state wasn't just discoveries of gold and silver, but a host of sweeping economic, social, and political changes that shaped Colorado and the Southwest into what it looks like today. If you need to know how important mining was in Colorado and the greater Southwest, just look at how many abandoned mines there are in the state. There are over 18,000 of them. Now, in the year 1845, a journalist named John O'Sullivan coined the phrase manifest destiny. Little did he know it would have such a sticking power to later generations. Manifest destiny was used at the time to describe America's 19th century attitude towards expansion. From the east to the west, America felt its expansion across the continent was not only justifiable, it was destiny. In the photo to your right, titled American Progress, painted in 1872 by John Gass, there is an allegorical representation of the modernization of the Southwest. Columbia, a personification of the United States, is showing leading civilization westward with the American settlers. She is shown bringing light from east to west, stringing telegraph wire, holding a book, and highlighting different stages of economic activity and evolving forms of transportation. And this whole mentality of manifest destiny was key to the justification for expansion, particularly during the Colorado Gold Rush of 1859. Historians Kent Curtis and Elliot West argue that the discovery of gold alone was not enough to set off a rush in Colorado. Two other factors, the removal and pacification of Native Americans and the unstable U.S. economy, opened the door for the surge of immigrants to the Southwest and in Colorado in 1859. First, the treaties of Fort Laramie in 1851 and Fort Atkinson in 1853, signed by representatives of the United States and several Plains Indians tribes, made the westward trails a bit safer for Anglo American travelers. Then, an economic downturn beginning in 1857 bankrupted many Eastern families, giving them the incentive to head west and start over. And finally, in 1857, news of Colonel Edwin V. Sumner's victory over a band of Cheyenne Indians in Kansas created the perception that Native Americans were no longer a threat in the Southwest. All of these events helped push Anglo Americans westward at a time of the first major gold discoveries in the Rocky Mountains. And on your left, you can see an actual photograph of the signing of the Fort Laramie Treaty. And this was signed by representatives and William T. Sherman, as well as several representatives of the Sioux tribe. Now, the Colorado Gold Rush is often referred to as the Pikes Peak Gold Rush. Although there was some prospecting around Pikes Peak in 1858 and 1859, major gold mining near the mountain did not begin until the 1890s with the Cripple Creek Gold Rush. But as the easternmost of Colorado's 14ers, the appearance of Pikes Peak on the western horizon serves as an encouraging signpost for weary westward immigrants in 1859, and the mountain came to represent the rush to the Rockies more generally. Its name was emblazoned on wagons and mentioned in newspaper reports about the rush, and the settlement of Old Colorado City in present day Colorado Springs was established at the base of Pikes Peak to supply gold camps in South Park. In February and March of 1859, thousands of gold seekers, spurred by bad crops and the pressure of debts, assembled in towns along the Missouri River in eastern Kansas and western Missouri for the journey west. For $600, half a year's pay for a clerk, they could buy 3 yoke of oxen, wagons, tools, tents, flour, bacon, and coffee for 4 people at the Pikes Peak Outfitters. For several weeks in April and May, newspaper editors in the major Missouri River towns reported the passage of 40, 75, or 100 teams a day, and observers found the road leading west from the river jammed with immigrants' wagons. In 1758, the first sighting of gold in Colorado is reported north of the Arkansas River. Ethnographer, historian, and naturalist Antoine Dupats is widely thought to be the first person to report seeing gold in the area, which then was part of the District of Louisiana. This area would later become the state of Colorado in 1876. Pratt's 1758 map showing where he saw gold is frustratingly vague and consists of a brief description of a site north of the Arkansas River, located close to a tributary flowing from the mountain that he described as a rivulet whose waters rolled down gold dust. However, those who explored the Southwest a short time later described Pratt's map as unreliable and filled with doubt. So it's hard to know exactly where Pratzes saw gold, or if he even saw it at all in the first place. Between 1807 and 1858, there existed many rumors of gold and modest discoveries of gold deposits throughout the Colorado region. In a journal entry written in 1807, the explorer and brigadier general Zebulon Pike wrote that a man named James Pursley showed him gold nuggets that he claimed he found in the South Park region of the land that would later become Colorado. Pike mentioned in his entry that he questioned the finding. More than 40 years later, gold was rumored to have been spotted in south central Colorado in the modern-day town of Lake City, but no one could nail down the exact spot of the finding. In 1858, prospectors traveling west to California's gold rush panned small amounts of gold near present-day Denver and Arvada at Cherry Creek, the South Platte River, and Ralston Creek. William Green Russell and a team of prospectors that included Cherokee Native Americans traveled to the South Platte River the next year and discovered gold at the Little Dry Creek. Many historians credit this discovery for launching the Pikes Peak gold rush that occurred the following year. In 1858, Montana City, which later would become Denver, is founded by gold seekers. Setting his sights on finding more gold, William Green Russell and a group of prospectors founded the settlement of Montana City on the banks of the South Platte River in 1858. But to great dismay of the ragtag group, little gold was found in the area and the settlement soon went bust. While Russell and his team might not have found riches when they settled next to the South Platte River, they are credited for establishing the first settlement in Denver and helping to kick off a gold rush that really helped to birth Colorado as a territory and later a state. And in the photo to the left, you'll see a reconstructed cabin in mine headframe at the site of Montana City, Colorado, near Denver. This is a reconstruction, of course, that visitors can go check out. However, it wasn't until 1859 that the Pikes Peak or Colorado Gold Rush truly began. After the areas surrounding Denver repeatedly produced disappointing amounts of gold, news that gold was discovered in the mountains west of the area in early 1859 quickly spread around the still new United States. In January of 1859, the prospector George A. Jackson found the first substantial amount of gold in Colorado, where Chicago Creek empties into Clear Creek in present day Idaho Springs. Jackson, who first traveled to the area after seeing clouds of steam rising from the hot springs, tried to keep his discovery a secret until word of his find spread after he tried to pay for mining supplies with gold dust. By that spring, throngs of prospectors flooded the area, including John H. Gregory, who struck gold between Black Hawk and Central City. Many other gold-bearing veins were discovered in the area soon after. Central City's population exploded from 10 people to over 10,000 in a single month that summer as hopeful prospectors flocked to the area. Later in 1859, rich gold deposits were found along the Georgia Gulch on the Swan River in the town we know as Breckenridge today. Later, as Colorado miners left to fight in the Civil War, gold production began to wane, with the majority of the easily discoverable gold already accounted for. The remaining miners changed their tactics by sinking their mine shafts and setting their sights on silver and other refractory ores. Almost as quickly as that had begun, the Pikes Peak gold rush was soon over, but between 1859 and 1864, the first discoveries of silver were recorded in Colorado, and in 1879, the Colorado silver boom began. Now, politically, the gold rush of 1859 inspired the creation of the Colorado Territory at the behest of gold seekers in 1861 and shifted the balance of power in the Southwest from the Cheyenne and Arapaho to the United States. It also marked the beginning of the decline of the Ute Indians in Colorado as the U.S. government moved to protect mining interests after 1859 by appropriating Ute territory through a series of treaties. By 1880, 21 years after the initial gold rush, the Utes had ceded most of the Rockies in western Colorado, their homeland for centuries, to the United States. As many as 100,000 gold seekers may have started for the so-called Pikes Peak gold fields over the course of 1859, but observers believe that only 40,000 actually reached Denver. Perhaps 25,000 entered the mountains between April and October. About 10,000 remained in Colorado by early August, with 2,000 in Denver, a few hundred in Golden, and most of the remainder engaging in mountain gold mining operations throughout the Front Range. The influx of so many white immigrants took a disastrous toll on the Native Americans living in Colorado's plains and in the mountains. When the rush began in earnest in 1859, groups of Cheyenne, Lakota, Arapaho, and Kiowa lived in the southwestern plains, while Ute and Arapaho bands lived throughout the Front Range. Plains Indians spent the harsh winters along the sheltered river bottoms of the South Platte River and its tributaries, as well as in the natural trough running north and south along the foothills. After 1859, Anglo-Americans increasingly traversed and occupied these areas, killing buffalo, trampling grazing grass, and cutting down precious timber. Native Americans soon found their resource base dwindling, and some began raiding wagon trains for supplies in hopes of scaring off other white immigrants. Meanwhile, in the mountains, the Ute and Arapaho increasingly found traditional hunting grounds occupied by white mining camps, which cut into supplies of timber as well as game. Economically, a variety of gold rush-related industries supplanted traditional Native American activities. For example, ranching and irrigated agriculture fed miners, while coal and iron industries provided energy for steam-powered mining equipment, railroads to ship ore to market, and bricks for its towns and cities. Raw ore needed to be smelted to produce valuable metals, and cities such as Pueblo and Durango developed alongside these busy smelters. Also, the success of the 1859 gold rush created a sustained interest in the mineral resources of the Rocky Mountains, which soon led to silver mining in Aspen, Leadville, and the San Juan Mountains, as well as to the 1890 Cripple Creek gold rush. Finally, the surge of mining initiated by the 1859 gold rush produced significant changes in the Colorado environment. To extract gold from quartz deposits, miners used dangerous chemicals such as cyanide, which often leaked into the streams, posing a threat to both wildlife and humans. Miner and taxidermist Edwin Carter noticed this effect as early as the 1860s, when he began finding pollution-induced abnormalities in animals. Deforestation associated with the mass construction of flumes, cabins, and sluices, as well as railroads and mining camps, as well as the removal of large quantities of rock in subsurface mining operations, resulted in less stable hillsides, making it easier for dislodged sediments to clog streams. One of the most important changes that mining brought to the Colorado environment was the exposure of millions of tons of buried rock to oxygen, initiating a process known as acid mine drainage. Once exposed to air, sulfides in the metal lodged within the rock begin to break down into sulfuric acid, which dissolves the metals and allows them to drain into local water sources. Although it was initiated during the 19th century, this process continues to affect Coloradans today. And one of the most dramatic examples occurred during the summer of 2015 when workers with the U.S. Environmental Protection Agency accidentally released a torrent of water contaminated with liquefied metals into the Los Animos River. And on your left, you can see a photograph of the 2015 Gold King mine wastewater spill in the Animas River in Colorado. Um, and of course, those rivers flowed not only in Colorado, but into our neighbors in New Mexico. Now, today, mining isn't really a part of most Colorado's lives, but virtually no part of the state has been untouched by this legacy. From prominent buildings, labor rights laws, transportation, and the capital city of Denver, Colorado wouldn't be the place it is today were it not for the 1859 gold rush.